Good day, everyone. I am Justin Maralviar, and I will be presenting to you how blood flows through the heart. Before we delve in further in blood flow, we need to understand what the heart is all about and its major parts. So in the general overview, the heart is the central organ of the circulatory system. The heart's pumping mechanism allows blood to flow to all parts of our body, and thus distributing oxygen and other nutrients. Without the heart, blood will remain static and dysfunctional. The heart also regulates blood pressure. Maintaining regular blood pressure is important to avoid risks of cardiovascular illnesses and to allow blood to properly function in the transport of materials. Lastly, the heart contains 4 primary chambers, which are the atria and ventricles on the left and right side. These chambers play an important role in facilitating efficient flow of blood in the heart. We proceed to the major parts of the heart. The first part is the right atrium, which is the upper chamber in the right side of the heart. Next is the tricuspid valve, which serves as a border between the right atrium and right ventricle. It helps in preventing backflow of blood from the ventricle to the atria. After the tricuspid valve is the right ventricle, the lower chamber in the right side of the heart. The next part is the pulmonary semilunar valve, between the pulmonary arteries and the right ventricle. Just like the tricuspid valve, it also prevents backflow. The upper chamber in the left side of the heart is called the left atrium. Between the left atrium and the left ventricle, the mitral valve is present, which marks the border between the two, and also it prevents backflow. Next is the lower chamber in the left side of the heart, called the left ventricle. Finally, the aortic semilunar valve, which serves as the border between the aorta and left ventricle. We proceed to the major blood vessels present in the heart. First is the superior vena cava, the major vein for the upper half of the body. The major vein for the lower half of the body is called inferior vena cava. Next are the pulmonary arteries, which carry the oxygenated blood to the lungs, and then pulmonary veins, which carry oxygenated blood from the lungs. Lastly is the major artery of the body, the aorta. Now we will discuss all about blood flow, starting off with the flow of the oxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood drained from veins all over the body gather and flow through the inferior and superior vena cava. Through the inferior and superior vena cava, blood flows and enters into the right atrium. In this part, the tricuspid valve is closed to prevent blood in the atria to enter the ventricle yet. In the next part, the blood from the right atrium now enters and flows into the right ventricle. The right atrium contracts and the right ventricle relaxes to allow blood to flow. Also, blood passes through the tricuspid valve in the process. This time, the tricuspid valve is open to allow blood to flow. However, the pulmonary semilunar valve is closed to prevent further flow of blood. From the right ventricle, blood now flows into the pulmonary arteries. The right ventricle contracts in order to pump blood into the pulmonary arteries. In order to prevent blood to flow back into the right atrium, the tricuspid valve closes. This closure produces the lub sound along with the mitral valve. This marks the start of pulmonary circulation. The pulmonary circulation is the series of blood flow between the lungs and heart through pulmonary blood vessels. As blood is pumped to the pulmonary arteries, it passes through the opened pulmonary semilunar valve. Afterwards, blood is oxygenated in the lungs through gas exchange in the alveoli. Now we proceed to the flow of oxygenated blood. From the lungs, blood flows to the pulmonary veins and arrives at the left atrium. In this part, the mitral valve is closed to prevent blood in the atrium to flow into the ventricle yet. Once oxygenated blood arrives at the left atrium, a cycle of the pulmonary circulation has ended and will repeat for the next cycle. In the next part, blood from the left atrium now flows into the left ventricle. The left atrium contracts to facilitate this flow to the relaxed left ventricle. Also, blood passes through the mitral valve, which is now open to facilitate this flow. The aortic semilunar valve is closed in this part, which produces the DUP sound along with the pulmonary semilunar valve. From the left ventricle, blood then flows into the aorta. This is done through contraction of the left ventricle. The mitral valve closes to prevent backflow of blood. This part of blood flow marks the start of systemic circulation and coronary circulation. Systemic circulation is defined as a series of blood flow between the heart and body through systemic blood vessels. On the other hand, coronary circulation is defined as a series of blood flow within the heart muscles through coronary blood vessels. Blood passes through the aortic semilunar valve, which is opened to facilitate this flow. From the aorta, blood flows to coronary arteries in the heart muscles to supply oxygen and go through coronary circulation. Also, blood will flow to other arteries throughout the body to deliver oxygen to tissues and proceed with systemic circulation. As blood delivers oxygen and becomes deoxygenated, it will now flow into veins until finally arriving again into the inferior and superior vena cava. Once blood re-enters the inferior or superior vena cava, it marks the end of one cycle of systemic circulation and coronary circulation. Blood flow in the heart now repeats for another cycle. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.